Hello, this is John Decker and Paul Selich here. We're looking forward to talking with you today about something that we think will make a lot of change in your life, and that's strategies to lower your college costs and minimize loans. So I'm John Decker with Every Student Sent, and with Paul Selich, who's with Every Student Sent and College Assistance Plus, and we want to talk with you about this subject that I think will be helpful to you and your kids, and we look forward to, at the end you can chat in questions and so on to this. Let us know what you're thinking. We'd be glad to answer your questions later. So think about this. College is a business. It's a huge business. And top private institutions charge what they do because a substantial number of people will pay for it. Well, think about this. How does your student help their business? So if you're helping their business, they're going to lean in your direction in terms of giving you a favorable deal. They're thinking about things like college retention rate. What is your student going to look like to highlight and show their retention statistics? There's things we'll cover later on that in the interview and so on that will touch on that. For your graduation rates, if your student can come out, that highlights this nationally in U.S. News and World Report for good graduation rates. So if they think your student will do that, that's a plus. Getting better SAT and ACT scores, that's an obvious. Students that like a college will market to other students. That's why I went to my college, because a friend of mine went to a particular university. And here's a big one: donors and contributors. Colleges actually run an algorithm to calculate to what degree and propensity you might be a lifetime donor. That'll come in a little bit later. So let's talk about this for a minute. Like, what is financial aid? Colleges call loans financial aid. That's, you don't call your car and your house financial aid. So really, what is financial aid? And we're going to talk about the ways you can really increase your meaningful scholarships. And college is really expensive. It's going up 3 to 5% a year. Look at now, over the last 20 years, it's gone from about 360 billion to 1.8 trillion. Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about the impact on student life and
Sure,
that?
I think you summarized it well, John. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and it still amazes me that, in fact, I was at a gathering yesterday, and some of the people I was talking to had put 4 or 5 kids through college, and they were responsible with the Parent Plus loans they had taken out. They were responsible for almost $600,000 in student loans. Now, their students were helping them with that, but that's a terrible burden on a family. I think what I still find, and this is really amazes me, even with all the publicity now about the Ivy League schools and how big their endowments are, um, people are still beholden to the fact that, and I think it's propagated by guidance counselors a lot, that it really is important where your son or daughter goes to college, and that's going to change their life and career. And having been a corporate executive for a lot of years, I can tell you, I never cared where a young person went to college. I cared about their ability to communicate, their ability to overcome rejection. I was hiring for the most part with salespeople, but I think there's a real misnomer out there about if my kid goes to an Ivy League school, they're going to be wildly successful. It appears from what I hear on television and radio that they'll be anti-Semitic, but I'm not sure they'll be wildly successful. So it's it's really a big um, purchase, as John pointed out, and people are doing it with loans, and that's dangerous for everybody.
Mhm. Um, on average, it's actually taking 5.5 years for a student to get a 4-year degree. That's because you're changing their majors so many times. If you add another fifth year, one more year is going to add 38% more to the cost, or another year and a half. So we'll talk a bit about figuring out how your student can get through in 4 years by determining what is their passion, what is their direction, but what is their skill, and what is a marketable job when they get out. Um, so Paul, you
John,
want
to
to
your
talk?
point,
You
John, to
want
your
to talk
point,
you want to talk just a minute about this one?
yeah, to your point, University or West Virginia University just eliminated some majors, and one of the majors they eliminated was puppetry. Now, if your son or daughter is going to college and you're paying $50,000 a year for a puppetry degree, but that's that's kind of standard fare for colleges. So what we do, we say to the student, and we'll talk about this in detail. We say to the student, talk to people who are doing the job you aspire to after you graduate. That's really important. And one of the things we do is we have 4,000 clients, so we can set a student up with an interview with whatever they aspire to do. But the more important thing is before you jump in the deep end of the pool with a $60, $70, $80,000 a year college, why don't you take some gen ed courses at a community college to get your sea legs comfortable academically, and then you'll be a transfer, and you'll be worth more money to the college, and we'll talk about that, how that manifests itself a little later.
Yeah, that's great advice, Paul. Of course, not everyone is student is going to want to go to a community college first, but it's a very powerful strategy when you can, even if it's just for 1 year. So let's talk about reducing college costs. That's really the name of the game here. And we're going to go through 6 steps on what we call the pathway to college process. And starting with step 1, we started touching on this, have career and major clarity. Paul, what processes have you found work in helping students find this out?
Well, we find it's very important for the student to talk to an individual who is now in the career they aspire to graduate to. So we actually arrange an interview prep session with our client, and he or she reaches out to the lawyer, the doctor, the engineer, whatever, and we script the call. And our clients tell us that that's one of the most powerful things we do, because it really validates for the student and family that yes, she does want to be an engineer, or she does want to be a physical therapist, and it allows the student to then apply to schools which really have that specialty, and not just another school. That's particularly important if you're going on for a graduate degree, because the graduate degree is going to be the degree that launches your career. So our services go all the way through grad school, and even helping the student find their initial job. And we've found, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but we found colleges do very little to help a student gain their first job. And we really focus on that.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And you've been doing this for about 21 years, and I've been involved in assisting in portions of this for the last dozen years. I've seen that you've got a process for doing an assessment and having a coach work through the details with your student. So they really end up with something that is not only something they have some passion about, but that they would love, that they'll really be a marketable job for. And we've also found that if students have a passion in high school, if they have a passion for what they're doing, they're going to study much harder. So let's talk about, okay, if you understand, let's say a student says, okay, I know what major to pick. Now let's talk about the clarity about your budget and your financial profile. What can you say about this, Paul?
Well, I keep learning about this. It's amazing to me how many families, again, I place a little bit of the blame on guidance counselors in high schools, because they do not get involved with the financial aspect of college. But every college demands insight into your finances, your earnings, your savings. And I'm amazed at how many people make mistakes in submitting those. In fact, I was working with one of my clients in California the other day, and I said, Glenn, we really got to look at what you gave to college, because the college had, with the information Glenn had given the college, they had him articulated as the ability to pay $33,000 a year. When I redid his financial submission, the actual number was $9,000 a year, which made a huge difference in how much he's going to pay for college. So one of the things I would say is, first of all, you need to know how much you can afford. And the reason people kind of throw that to the woodpile is because you can borrow all the money you want. This is one of the few things in life where you can borrow money without any ramifications. If you're going to buy a house, you can't borrow more money than the house is worth. But in the case of college, you can borrow more money than your students may ever make in their lifetime. In fact, I was talking to one of my clients the other day, who I helped 3 of her kids, and she said for herself now, I didn't allow her to borrow any money for her kids going to college, but she said, I'm 63 years old and I'm still paying back $420 a month for my personal student loans that I took out when I went to college. It's just crazy. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact they don't understand financial submissions. There's no guidance given. I mean, very few people do their own income taxes. They go to experts. And I suggest that you really have an expert, and I think we are expert in this. Look at your CSS profile or free application for federal student aid submissions and make sure they're done accurately. I can tell you from my experience, 80 to 90% have mistakes to the detriment of the submitter. So it's a shame. So, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, thanks. And I know that it's really important as you look at the realities of the cost of college, and you may have multiple students, to look at the budget for your whole family, cash flow that out, and then get the student to buy in, because otherwise, often the students will drive the process by just wanting to go to the most expensive school that their friend wants to go to, but they're not understanding the family financial implications.
John, and I would just add one more thing to what you just said, which is powerful. Don't go to accepted students days at colleges, because they're marketing machines. They know how to make your son and daughter be very excited about going to that school, and that may be a school that doesn't meet your budget. We always direct our clients to schools that make the most sense, where we know they're going to be able to afford it. And people don't do that. They, on advice of a guidance counselor, they say, you got a real smart son or daughter, why don't you take them to Harvard, Yale, Cornell, and of course the kid's going to fall in love with that school. It's crazy. It's a backward process.
Right. Yeah, once you know the major you want to pick, so you know the right school, and you know how much as a family you want to spend on that particular student, then you can have a targeted, comprehensive list of students of colleges, but then you can do it rationally, so the student is part of the buy-in, and they may not be the most expensive schools, or there may be ones where we know we can get a particular deal. It's also a process. When we'll get to the later in this talk about negotiating better deals, we want to find a what we call a leverage school, one that can compete directly with that school. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's all about this.
And John, when we compile the list for our clients, we tell them before they ever visit a school actually what we think it's going to cost them, the bottom line, not what the school, not the list price, but the bottom line. And that's so powerful for families.
Yeah, that's great. So as we said, you want to include some leverage schools. We'll talk more about that. And so now we're to the stage. These last 3 blocks are really important. We'll talk about the whole application interview and essay assistance section, because a lot of colleges don't require an interview, but we highly recommend you do an interview with a department head that can then put some leverage on financial aid. And I think Paul's got some stories and illustrations about this process.
Yeah, I think what John just said is so profound, because again, when guidance counselors are subject to colleges coming out to them in person usually and telling them the kind of student they're looking for. So hypothetically, I'm looking for a student that scores 13 or 1400 on the SAT score. I'm looking for a student who wants to major in whatever. We find that if you allow the guidance counselor and the college to drive that process, as we said in the earlier segments, you're really making a mistake. And we really scrutinize what the application process means. Colleges don't want, I've found this out over a period of time, colleges don't want the student to be actively involved in the application process other than to write the essay. We take that a couple steps further. I hear from colleges all the time, we don't believe the student writes the essay now. They use AI or GPT chat. So we actually insist on, as John pointed out earlier, an interview with the head of the department you're going to major in. And we script the interview. I actually do a preparatory interview with the student before he or she interviews with the head of the department. And what I talk about is things that the student needs to talk about in that interview, like how did you decide to be an engineer? What are your expectations of our college? Who has influenced you the most in your life? You know, a parent, a grandparent, whatever. But what I find is when and many of this is not the fault of the student, it's the fault of social media and the cell phones that people live with today. They don't communicate well, and communication is the number one talent that prospective clients and colleges are looking for. In fact, I was doing an interview prep session the other day with a young lady locally, and I said to her, Lucy, before we start, you say like a lot, like this, like that, you know how young people talk. And I said, I'm gonna count over the next 30, 45 minutes. I'm gonna count every time you say like. And so at the end of the interview prep session, I said, Lucy, how many times do you think you said like? She said, oh, I know, Mr. Selge. I said it 5 or 6 times. I said, you said it 45 times. You cannot speak like a 15-year-old. You need to speak like an adult. That's what colleges are looking for. So we practiced the interview a couple more times. I got her likes down to about 6. But that's what colleges are looking for. They're looking for adult communication from their potential students. And an application essay does not show that. That's why we're such proponents of interviews, personal interviews with the head of the department. And we work with the student endlessly to get them to come across like an adult communicator.
The things I think is powerful is when a student interviews with a department head, and a great time to do that is during your college visit because you're there, and so you can get that person, that department head, to then be an advocate for you. The way to really get them in your corner is to have them absorb and resonate with your story. So we find that if we task students to think of 3 stories that will illustrate the points that they're trying to make, rehearse those a bit. And once the student is in the middle of telling a story, they're not in just a reactionary mode. They're actually controlling the conversation. They feel comfortable, they're warm, and the department head will then remember that, and later will use them later on to help negotiate a better deal.
And John, I would just add to that. That's powerful. If a school and a department head refuses to meet with your student, they're not really serious about your student coming there. Nobody's that busy that they can't take 20 to 30 minutes with a prospective student. And the colleges really don't like that because they think it slows down the process. The colleges they tell me this, the colleges want the admissions process to be as impersonal as possible. They don't want the student to be involved. We think it's critical for the student to be involved, particularly with the head of the department they're going to major in.
It's great. It's great. So yeah, interviews can be the game changer. We've seen people get into medical school that weren't allowed in until they did a good interview. So let's talk about, so these steps we've talked about, these 4 steps before, are the best way to maximize your first financial aid offer. And so when you get that in the spring, that's the place you're trying to get to. Now is the next key step that really requires some innovative thinking, and that is appealing or negotiating with these top schools for additional financial aid. And this is probably a hallmark of the work we've been doing for many, many years. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about the process for that, Paul.
Sure. Well, we've been doing this, as John alluded to, over 20 years, and we've saved millions of dollars. And when I say saved, I mean we've appealed or negotiated. Colleges don't want you to use that term, negotiate, because it puts them too much like a commodity, but it is a commodity, as John pointed out earlier. So what we do, we appeal for more scholarship money or grant money. And we have a process that we use. It really is effective. I would say we appeal for our clients at least twice. Once before the student goes to college, preliminary to their freshman year, and then once they finish their first semester or first year academically. Now, I'll share in the preliminary appeals to freshmen going to college, we're about 95% successful in getting what we asked for. But in the second appeal, either after the first semester or first year, we're 100% successful. Reason being is because colleges don't want to lose students. Every parent that I've ever talked to says, "Oh, I just hope they're not homesick. They find good friends at college, and they make the adjustment well." Well, that's all important, but we want to use the fact that the college doesn't want to lose that student. And when you say, why would the college be worried about that? Well, you can't replace that student. Colleges have an unlimited funnel of applicants coming out of high school to go to college. But once their freshman year starts, and they can't, how do you recruit sophomores to college? It's very difficult, sophomore students. So, in fact, I've got clients who are actually college employees, and they tell me that some colleges lose over 20% of their freshmen after the first semester, first year. So if you're an admissions executive in a college and you all of a sudden are faced with replacing 20% of your incoming freshmen, you don't want to lose anybody. So what we do, we use a couple things that aren't available to the general public. First of all, we have a database, 20-year database that we've accumulated of competitive schools. So for instance, I'm in Western New York right now, and there's a great school here called Rochester Institute of Technology. Very good school. Although when I started this business, it was $30,000 a year. Now it's $65,000 a year. So what we do, if somebody wants to go to RIT, we have a school. We categorize all our colleges with competitive leverage schools. So no matter where you want to go, we know there's a school across the country or someplace else that college does not want to lose your student to. And in this case, we use this a college in Missouri, and you'll say, why would Rochester, New York college be concerned about Missouri? Well, Missouri is a higher rated, it's a state school, but it's higher rated than academically than RIT, and RIT is a good school. But they will kill to get kids from another part of the country. So if I have a student from New York who wants to go to RIT, I have him or her apply to this Missouri college, and they end up getting an offer, and I've done this with 50 kids now, 50 students. They end up getting an offer where they can go to that college for less than 30 grand a year. That's room, board, and tuition, because they want a diverse student makeup, and of course they want geographically diversity as well. So I go back to RIT, who on their $65,000 list price usually gives you $12,000 to $15,000 scholarship, and I say, you got to sharpen your pencil, because I've got an offer here for $29,000 from a better school, and typically I can get another $5,000 to $7,000 a year scholarship from RIT. Now, if you think about that, if that's all we per year, if that's all we get, that's $28,000 savings. So it's a very, very successful process. As far as I know, we're the only ones do it, because most consultants just talk about getting your kid into a school of their choice. We do that, but we also want to lower the price as much as possible. So it's a very, very strategic way to approach the college process. I'm sure colleges don't really like it, but too bad about them, because we're the consumer. So we've been very successful doing it.
Yeah. And let me clarify something in the process. So, if you're going to do this, so we find doing it in writing is important. And when Paul says we go back, so actually we found it works best to go through the parent. So we draft the letter. We look at the competitive schools. We determine exactly how much we think they can go down, because if you ask for too much, they kind of blow you off. If you ask for the right amount, they'll accept that. But we do it through the parents. We draft the letter, let the parents send that in, and we're in the background doing it. So, not in the foreground. That's really the best way to do it.
And John, I would just add, we don't go through financial aid. We copy financial aid, but we really try to go to the highest level in the college we can, which is usually the president or provost. And they're very responsive.
Yeah. Are there any other stories you can tell about how this process has been helpful?
Well, I actually learned this. I think I told you this last week, John. I actually learned this, or somebody gave me the idea of doing this. I was buying a car, and a friend of mine said, "Have you ever thought about using a consultant to help you buy a car?" And I bought hundreds of cars through the years. And I said, "No, what does he do?" And he said, "Well, he's a tax accountant, and he goes and he'll shop your offer." So I said, "Wow, that makes sense." So I think I paid the guy $250. He saved me about $7,000 on an Acura because he went to 6 different Acura dealers in the region and got better deals. So I said, "Why can't I do that with colleges?" And that's how I started this process. And again, it really works. And I don't know of another consultant organization that does it.
Yeah. Well, I know you and know how we work. Our passion is really to help families, and that's why we're doing this. So, um, I know that you're both of us are available to chat and dialogue with any of you about how this would be helpful to you in your particular situation. Um,
John, just let me add one more thing before we move
yeah.
on to finances. I've discovered that I've been successful in getting students that didn't meet the profile that the college was looking for admission into that school. And I have a strategy to do that. I just got a young man who was 900 SAT, 1,000 SAT, got denied at Wake Forest 3 or 4 times. And his father reached out to me and said, "Paul, can you get him into Wake Forest?" And I said, "Certainly." So I reached out to the president, and I dealt with the president. This was the father happened to be an orthopedic surgeon. I said they're willing to pay full price for 4 years, and guess what? They accepted him, even though he was only a 990 SAT score, and it really befuddled his high school that we were able to do that. But that just underscores what John and I are talking about. College is a commodity, and colleges are moved off the dime by finances.
So the best time to start this conversation is maybe the summer between 10th and 11th grade, while the
Right.
students are getting ready to think about which classes they take in 11th and 12th grade. That's an optimum time. Then they can really start assessing what is their career, what is their passion. Of course, some students will, by the time they apply to college, they'll know exactly what they want to do. Some may go through a process and certainly eliminate a lot of things that don't make sense and narrow it down. But the closer you get to that, the better chance you'll have of having a satisfying job and life and spending less time in college. But right now, it's also important to think about for second semester seniors and current college students. March to August is a great time to help appeal and negotiate better deals, and we'll talk about that here down below. Um,
John,
and
just before we go ahead, I would say too that it's very important to understand that the guidance counselors, a high school guidance counselor, they're well intended, but they're not on the consumer side. They really they want to ingratiate themselves with the student, and but they all the information they give is from the college's perspective, and I understand that. That's the way they're trained, but that is not going to help you as a consumer with college.
And we don't want to spend too much time on athletes right now, but it's important to understand that coaches often are overbooking the people that they're looking at, and so there's a way to start telling your student what to say and not to say to the recruiting coaches, so that they end up getting the best financial deal, and really putting the athletics determination in parallel with the right career major and direction, and doing it in a balanced way rather than just letting sports entirely drive the game, um, ending up with a better award, the right college, and so on. Um,
John, as you know, I wrote a book. It's called Win College. It's on Amazon for $10, and I spend a whole chapter on sports in college, and it's probably one of the things that I found the most emotion about. My kid plays soccer. My kid plays lacrosse, football, whatever. But the lack of information and understanding on college sports is amazing. There's very little money given. I don't care about the name, image, and likeness thing that's going around now, but there's very little money given out, and you cannot believe what they're not bad people, but you can't believe what the coach at the college tells you. So, as John pointed out, you always need a backup offer, and we've developed a process to do that over the years. But more importantly, you need to go, if your son or daughter wants to play at school, you really need to go where they can play. And that's something that people lose sight of all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks, Paul. So if you think about the overall strategies, this will summarize what we've talked about. So first, all these things will end up saving you money, have a better outcome. Finding the right major and career, you're doing a really informed college search so that you pick the right colleges and don't just focus on the ones that are the most expensive. Sports decisions can be part of that. All this to get the first offer better than typical. And after that, appealing and negotiating for more support, and then appeals while you're already in college, as we talked about. If you avoid the 5th year of college, well, another lap around the track is going to cost you some money, so avoid that. And then doing the same thing in grad school, you can reduce tuition there. It's very, very effective in grad school. Getting the best student loans, we've got a process to find the very best student loans and the ones where the parent can be released as a cosigner much earlier. Um, and then there's the whole process of networking and job preparation, which is really the name of the game, getting the right job and being able to land that position and saving a lot of time. I mean, your time is worth a lot of money. So kind of a process here. So if for people that are interested, and this would be current seniors and students already in college, appealing and negotiating. There's a service we have that will look at your current offers in universities. It may include some leverage schools. There'll be ability in here to review the FAFSA and the CSS profile and conduct this appeal process now and again with a semester of good grades. And all we need is
John, I would just add that we don't take anybody that we don't think we can be
that's true.
successful. So
Yeah,
we'll
that's
just look at what your landscape is, and we'll tell you, no, you know, you've got the best deal you can get.
yes, absolutely. We do that a lot. Yes, that's we're we're in here to help students, and we kind of grow by grassroots reputation. And so if we think it's not going to save a lot of money, we'll tell you. And so, but if you just tell us, and there's a link we'll give you at the end. Just tell us your college of interest, your GPA, SAT, the year the students in college, what current grants and scholarships you have, and major and goal. We'll be able to estimate the savings if there are any. Maybe there's not in some cases, and the true feasibility. But we'll estimate the approximate amount we think. And then if you want to move ahead with this, we'll appeal twice, and we'll appeal once, and then again. There's what we call a zero cost guarantee. So the cost is only $1,000, but if we don't save that through the process, we'll refund the rest. So it's really pretty much a no-brainer. And like I said, we won't go after this if we don't think it's going to be successful.
I agree. I think I'm so confident in our ability to move the needle with colleges that, as John pointed out, we give a money back guarantee if we don't save you more than you paid us. So um, it's a no risk situation. But I think the earlier you can get involved with our company, the better it is. The more we can prevent you from making mistakes in the entire process. I find not just with sports athletes in high school, but this is a very emotional process. And the more you allow the emotion to drive the process, the more dangerous it is financially for you.
Right, right. And for those that are have high school sophomores, juniors, seniors, rising seniors, there's a one-on-one college consulting process that covers all these 6 bullets that we talked about earlier. You see those below. And there's a consultant, there's a dashboard that captures all the communications, makes it simple for you and the students, very relational, a lot of Zoom interaction. And the cost for that is only $4,000, which covers you from high school through college and even into grad school.
Yep. And
So
John, we've been very, as you pointed out earlier, we've been very successful in helping graduates find jobs.
yes, yes. So yeah, we'd love to chat with you. Some of our information is there as far as the phone numbers. A good way to get in touch with us is if you go to everystudentsent.org, you'll see an engage menu and just click college planning on the engage menu. and you'll be able to review some of this information and get in touch with you, and we'd be glad to chat.